Julie, thank you so much. I want you to understand this tableau. Paul is a Jew, was formerly a member of the Sanhedrin, the ruling court, and has been in prison for 2 years. Festus is the new Roman governor. His actual name is Porcius Festus, which means good news for the pigs. Porcius Festus. I don't know who called him that, but I'm not sure if it's ironic that he went to rule in Judea, where, of course, pigs were forbidden. But good news for the pigs. So, good news for the pigs, who wants to get the Jews on his side and is giving some special treatment to them to break Roman rules, is kind of chairing this courtroom occasion. And then King Agrippa and his wife Bernice come on the scene. What you need to know is that King Agrippa's wife Bernice is also his sister. And King Agrippa himself is the son of King Agrippa, who had James, the first apostle, killed, the grandson of Herod, who had John the Baptist beheaded, and the great-grandson of Herod, who sought to kill Jesus, killing all those baby boys under the age of 2. This is Agrippa. Bernice, his sister, she's been married 3 times and divorced twice, and she goes on to have an affair with Emperor Titus, eventually being kicked out of Rome because the Romans fear her power too much. An older woman leading astray a younger emperor. She's a powerful woman in her own right. Agrippa, slightly less powerful, a vassal king, brought up in Rome, Roman in all but name. The scene isn't really the scene of a courtroom. It's the scene of an event. You can think of it more as X Factor or Britain's Got Talent. It's one of those red buzzer moments where there's a group of really important A-listers on a stage and Paul in chains. We're given no doubt about the picture. We're told Agrippa and Bernice come in great pomp. I don't know how many watched the King's Speech, but I'm told that the robe that the king wore was 18 foot long. It was the longest robe that's been worn at a royal opening of Parliament for some time, and the pomp is not a mistake. Well, Bernice and Agrippa come in with that pomp, and the message put it that anyone who was anyone was there. I think that's a fair demonstration. This is a moment. Why? Well, because it's Festus's inauguration as governor. It's like the beginning of his opportunity to make an impression upon the Jewish people. Everyone wants to be there for the new government. The new parliament's starting. No one wants to miss out, even if they fly straight off to America immediately after the King's speech. No one wants to miss out. And Bernice and Agrippa, well, they want to get on the right side of Festus too. They have a complex relationship with their Jewish subjects. The high priests, for example, around this time ordered a special wall to be built across the temple courtyard so that Agrippa's palace no longer had a view of the Holy of Holies. So this is a funny group of celebrities, all with their own foibles, all with their own stuff going on in the background. This is the scene. Paul, remember, whose name means small or humble, is brought out in chains before Festus, good news for pigs, Agrippa and his sister/wife. It's not much of a trial, but it is an opportunity. And I want to pick out 3 words for you. The first word I want to pick out is mad. The second word is happy. Mad, first of all. In the middle of this kind of display, this pomp and this ceremony, Festus says, "Enough! Are you mad?" He stops Paul. And Paul, he doesn't think he's guilty. He's not got much against Paul. But are you mad? He says to Paul. Are you insane? You're out of your mind. This is chapter 26, verse 24. You're out of your mind, he shouted. Like he couldn't keep a lid on it anymore. He's here with his new friend Agrippa and his new friend Bernice, and this little Jewish rabbi is whittering on. Are you mad? He interrupts the sermon. Now, we don't often interrupt sermons in this congregation, but there would be cause to, right? There may be an occasion where you have to. If what's being preached isn't of God, please do stop it and shout, interrupt. We're so British, we wouldn't ever dare to do so. But I have once sat in church and heard someone say things that I disagreed with so profoundly, I still to this day regret that I didn't say, stop, hang on a minute, are you sure? And that's what is happening here. Festus interrupts and says, are you mad? Are you out of your mind? Why? Why is he asking Paul if he's out of his mind? Number one, because Paul is proclaiming the resurrection. He's saying that Jesus, a well-known rabbi who was crucified in public, is risen from the dead. That is not rational. Indeed, it is a stumbling block for Jews and foolishness for Gentiles. That's what Paul himself writes in 1 Corinthians, perhaps informed by these experiences. It's madness to claim that Jesus is risen from the dead, because everyone had seen him crucified. They'd seen his body taken down, and they'd seen him buried. And logical people don't believe in resurrection from the dead, because we know we bury our parents and our grandparents, and we tend their graves. And Paul is proclaiming the resurrection from the dead, and I think Festus is just a bit embarrassed. Look, he's got all the important people, and this Jewish rabbi is whittering on about resurrection from the dead. Oh, maybe he wanted a better display, a better argument, deeper philosophy. Instead, he's getting this claim that this Jewish rabbi, Jesus, is risen from the dead. Are you mad? He says. A second reason he asks Paul if Paul is mad is that Paul declares himself happy. He says, I am happy to be here. This is this humble rabbi in tattered clothes and chains who says, I'm happy to be here. Maybe really has lost his marbles. You can understand why Festus is pushing here. Are you insane? Is his question. How can you possibly be happy in chains? You're a Jewish rabbi who's not really done very much wrong. If you would just shut up and stop going on about Jesus, we could let you go. Remember, this is the repeated refrain of Romans. Romans describe those Christians as those people who persisted in singing hymns to Christ as God. If they just stopped singing Kumbaya, everyone could get on with their life very happily. Why won't they just stop singing? If only they could accept Jesus was a nice man rather than God, we could all get on very happily. I think that's where Festus is at. He doesn't understand how Paul can possibly claim himself to be happy in chains. I think the third reason he thinks Paul is mad is that Paul's message is one of transformation that is obviously going to irritate all the Jewish audience. But are you mad? Can't you see that you're inflaming the Sanhedrin? Can't you see that you're irritating all the Jewish leaders? They'd already planned to ambush you on the road to Jerusalem and kill you. Why don't you just shut up? You're making it worse. So I think that Festus really genuinely looks at Paul with pity and wants him to just shut up. He's digging his own grave. If you just be quiet, Paul, then we could all be friends. Why don't you just stop it now and go and sit down? I think he's genuinely bewildered about how this man in chains can claim himself to be happy. And so he says, are you mad? I wonder, friends, the last time anyone worried that you might have lost your marbles. I wonder the last time someone said to you, are you insane? I bet they didn't. I bet it hasn't happened in a while. And the reason I bet no one's asked you if you're insane is because you're a very reasonable person. You don't upset the apple cart. You don't turn over the tables in the temple. You do all that you can to get on and live at peace with people. But I wonder if you have bitten your tongue occasionally just so that no one thought you were mad, when in fact God was inviting you to open your mouth regardless of what they thought of you. I wonder if there are occasions where you just thought, I'll just bite it a little bit to get on with people. I wonder if there are moments where you knew you could have opened your mouth, but instead of doing today, I'm convinced that God calls you to open your mouth, to speak that which is true, to tell of his ridiculous love, his unconditional care, his uneconomical grace. It makes no sense to leave the 99 sheep to go for the one, yet that is what Christ has done for you. What is man that you are mindful of him? It makes no sense that God would make all of this universe for your sake. It's an irrational claim. To place man at the center of the purpose of the universe. To say God made the whole universe for Barbara, that's madness. To say that the purpose of all those stars was pat, that's foolishness. To say that God did all of this, all of those galaxies for Fleur, that makes no sense. The maths doesn't add up. But this is our claim, that God made the whole universe for this purpose. That Alan might know Jesus' love. That Julie might say, God is gracious. That you and I might give him glory. So don't bite your tongue, because this truth is a necessary truth that people need to hear. Festus said, earlier in chapter 25, now a certain Jesus, as though there were many Jesuses, and there was just this one. This certain Jesus needs to be heard of and talked about and never forgotten. I call you and nudge you and urge you not to bite your tongue. The second thing is Paul saying he's happy. That's one of the reasons why Festus thought he was mad. But I want to ask you this. Could you be happy in that situation? Would you be happy, chained and in rags, forgotten about in Caesarea for 2 years? Could you stand up before the court and say, I am happy to be here? Or would it be impossible for you? Does your contentment and your well-being depend on the state of your soul or the state of everything else around you? Because this is the question that this provokes me to. Paul could say he was happy though he was chained, though he was on trial, though the people around him wanted to ambush him and kill him on the way back to Jerusalem. He could say, I am happy to be here. Can you say that if your body lets you down? Can you say it if you find yourself weak and weary? Could you say it if you found yourself penniless and on the side of the road? Could you say, I am happy to be here if you were taken in chains before a court? Paul could, because he knew he was doing the thing that he was called to do. When he was saved on that road to Damascus, God spoke to him and said he was being called to the Gentiles. He was being called to proclaim the gospel. And here he finds himself, though in chains and in rags and 2 years in prison, he finds himself doing the thing that God has called him to do. So I ask you, are you more content when you have all you want, or when you have all you need? Because I say to you, sometimes having all you want stands in the opposition to knowing all you need. Sometimes having everything you want and having it all your way becomes the source of satisfaction that pushes you off the narrow path. Sometimes having it your way means not having it Christ's way. It means being content only when the fridge is full and the cupboards are full, when life is full, when all is well. I ask you to test yourself on this. Can you be content when you have nothing if you have Christ? Finally, in the whole of this story, we see Paul facing the accusations he has against him without fear. I think the reason he does that is because he knows he has God's presence with him. Because he knows he has God's presence with him, he sees this moment as a decisive moment to share. And I want to encourage you to think about every moment that happens to you from now on as a moment to share. Whether it feels a moment of triumph or a moment of despair, it is a moment for sharing. And that is why Agrippa says, if we'd have gone on a little longer, Paul, you might have converted me. Agrippa declares himself an almost Christian. An almost Christian. Oh, you nearly had me there, Paul. Agrippa is listening carefully to what Paul has to say. And he says, look, you've only spoken to me for a short time, but you nearly got me. And Paul's response is, well, short or long, I pray God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today may become what I am, except for these chains. Paul's purpose in this moment is to convert, is to rescue, is to bring light into that which is dark. That's obviously going to be costly for Agrippa because he's married to his sister. It's going to be costly to Festus because he's giving backhanders to the Jews to try and keep them happy. It's going to be costly to Bernice. To the whole crowd assembled on the podium, the idea of converting to Christ is going to be hugely costly. But that is Paul's purpose in this moment, to share the love of Jesus with them no matter what. I want you to know this. Paul and everyone in that room knew who Bernice was. He did not treat her with disrespect. Paul knew that Agrippa was the son of the murderer of James, the grandson of Herod, who killed John, the great-grandson of Herod who killed all those boys, he treated him with the utmost respect. Paul knew who Good News for Pigs was and what his relationship with the Jewish elders was. He knew who he was in front of, and he did not hold back. 1 Peter 3:15 says this, and I repeat it to you as words worthy of remembering. In your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. In your hearts, my friends, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that you have. Do so with the utmost gentleness and respect. You see, there is nothing more tragic, there is no worse place, there is no more heinous condition than being an almost Christian. Hearing of the love of Christ and walking away is the most horrific place for any human to be. Being crucified next to Christ, knowing of his mercy and spitting at him is the worst place to be. Knowing yourself to be selfish and in need of rescue, but rejecting the rescuer, coming close and saying you almost had me there, is the worst place to be. Saying there might be a God, but I'm too busy for him, is the worst place to be. I don't know if you saw in the news the picture of that Amazon tribe on the water bank in, I'm going to say Peru, not Bangladesh, definitely South America. It's in the news this week. A group of tribesmen, I think it's the edge of Peru, but I would normally imagine it to be Brazil, coming out of the jungle, and there they are photographed by Survival International, a tribe of people on the banks of the river. Better to be them, who've never heard the name of Christ, and yet may look at the stars and say, crumbs, I am in need of grace. Look how big the universe is. Better to be them than to be the people walking past the door of the chapel every Sunday, hearing the singing and saying, no, that's not for me. Better to be entirely ignorant of what Christ has done than to hear it and say, you nearly had me there. Better to be 1,000,000 miles from grace than to have grace confront you and say, I don't need that. Better never, ever, ever to hear and to find yourself at the end in desperate need of mercy than to hear and to reject. Better not to be an almost Christian. So I want you to imagine the people in your life who are Agrippa, who are watching your actions and hearing your words, and who say, you nearly had me there, John. Margaret, I want you to pray for them. Jane and Kevin, you're going to go and meet them. All new neighbours. Much better that they never know of the Christ in you than they know, get close, and run away. May God rescue those who are almost there, who've heard of his grace, but trust in their own strength instead of in the goodness of the Lord. May God touch those in your lives who are judging and questioning the Christ you speak of. May God reach them afresh. May he empower you to place your hope in him and speak freely of that hope that you have. May more people ask if you're mad, and may you have more opportunity, though you may feel in chains, to declare yourself happy because of what God has done. May he who has paid the price in your life be more than sufficient. Amen. Let's pray. Jesus, we believe you to be the stone the builders rejected, a rock that causes some to stumble and others to fall. We believe your resurrection to be a foolishness to those who consider themselves rational, your grace to be crazy that consider themselves measured, your love impossible for those who consider themselves learned. We thank you for this story of this small and humble man who met with those filled with pomp and told them truth. We ask your help that our lips might be unglued, our tongues unstuck, that from our mouths might come praise for your name. Lord, help us in all that we do and in all that we are to somehow give you glory. Please, Jesus, do more than we could dare to ask or imagine, now and forever. Amen. We're going to sing some of Paul's words together before we share in this symbol.